I'm ranting. Webster, the rest of this segment, the next segment, let's focus on the royal wedding, break it down, the true power, what the spectacle is all about. Webster, Griffin, Tarpley, good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for your spirit, right? The righteous indignation against this monstrosity. Certainly, if you look at what these American networks have done with this event, I think this is really a revolting spectacle. Once Queen Elizabeth was asked about what her ideology was, and her answer was, "We are older than capitalism and socialism." And it's true, because what she represents is feudalism. This is a feudal or neo-feudal degenerate that heads up this family. Now, she's not an absolute monarch. This is an oligarchical monarchy. But the power of the monarch within the oligarchy is very considerable, as you've been...
well, it's also, they're all intermarried. It's hereditary. It's a gang. Right. It's like the La Cosa Nostra.
Maybe we just give some examples. I think if you wanted to look at this, do a short summary, you could organize it around themes like insanity, in other words, mental degeneracy, which they have very, very heavily, and then support for genocide.
Because inbreeding, even with the Egyptians, you know, a lot of their folks only lived at age 5 or so. I mean, inbreeding causes...
It says Dieu est mon droit, and that Dieu est mon droit means incest is fine as long as you keep it in the family. George III was stark raving mad, the tyrant. Queen Victoria, for the last 40 years of her life, was a recluse who ran a death cult around her dead husband, Prince Albert, and she had seers, occultists, apparitions, Ouija boards.
Same thing with Tony Blair. That's where this starts.
Well, poor Tony, one of the things we have today is that this was a hard right turn by the monarchy today, because neither of the two Labor Party guys, not Tony Blair and not Gordon Brown, were invited today. So this is really one of the most important political...
Well, Webster, I'm relishing this. Stay there. We'll be right back to break down this disgusting spectacle. All right, Webster, you've got the floor. Start breaking down why this royal wedding is so abhorrent. People say, well, just ignore it if it's bad. No, this is how they're selling themselves as a propaganda ploy to the world.
It's an exercise in brainwashing the American people on a pretty vast scale. Again, George III was stark raving mad. There was even a movie about that some years ago. Victoria spent 40 years of her life as a recluse, practically never going outside. She lived in Balmoral Castle. Some years ago, the prescription records of the local pharmacy were found. She was an opium addict in the form of laudanum, which was a tincture, a solution of opium in alcohol that they would use. And she was known as Mrs. John Brown because she spent all of her time with this Scottish, rustic, right, who lived there. And he basically had the adjoining bedroom. So that was Mrs. John Brown. Other examples would be, you look at Prince Philip, right? He wants to come back reincarnated as a deadly virus to kill people and solve the problem of overpopulation in the world. I mean, that statement goes beyond anything Hitler ever said in public, right? That you want to kill people for the purpose of lowering the population. Prince Charles, right? The father of the groom. What's with him? He says he talks to plants. All right, fine, anybody can talk to plants. But then he added, and they answer me. So when the plants start answering you, then you know that you're pretty much in trouble.
But we know medically that inbreeding, it doesn't just cause deformities, it always causes insanity, megalomania. And here is an inbred group of megalomaniacs in these 17th century commander outfits festooned with medals, with women all over the world buying teacups and throwing flowers at them. This is like groveling at the feet of a cesspit. It's like bathing in maggot leavings.
It's well said. The great-great-great-uncle of the pair, right, the couple who got married today, was Prince Albert Victor Edward, known as Prince Eddie. And according to most historians, he is the main suspect of being Jack the Ripper.
Yes.
And not that he was necessarily insane to start with.
Well, syphilis. Syphilitic.
Syphilis, and he probably died of syphilis.
Dripping scrofula.
Okay. But apart from this now, the insanity is one thing, but then this affinity for Nazism and the affinity for genocide. Now, the key guy, of course, is King Edward VIII, who was a close personal friend of Hitler. This is about 1936, right? He was forced out very soon.
When the war started, he had to run out through Portugal. He was busy groveling at Hitler's feet.
He was a volunteer to Hitler to become the viceroy of a Nazi puppet state in Great Britain. If Hitler had conquered the British Isles, he would have come forward and say, make me, in effect, the king.
He'd be the British equivalent of a Vichy.
Of Marshal Pétain. He would have been the Marshal Pétain, except he would have said, I'm a member of the royal family. And when you think about it, that would have meant that Nazism would have come into Canada and into Australia and into New Zealand because of the way the British...
And it would have gotten the British intelligence network. Hitler would have won at that point.
Hitler would have gotten a foothold in the North American continent.
No, Hitler linked up with the British Empire would have been unstoppable. Don't you agree?
Yes. Well, it would have been a very grave thing, but it would have meant that a lot of institutions in the empire, a lot of United Empire loyalists would have immediately said, well, if the king is Edward and he's supporting Hitler, then we have to support Hitler too. So that's very...
Because Hitler was a rock star at that time.
The entire history of this British oligarchy, I mean, it's not just...
Well, let's continue. Back in 1 minute. Let's continue, Webster, because I want to finish up with some of the history, then get to this current spectacle. They have to hide most of the royals because they're so mentally ill and deformed. They trot out the few that can actually talk. Doctor of History, economist, Webster Griffin Tarpley's our guest for the rest of the hour. Then Dr. Bob Bowman's coming in. I'm tempted for a segment or two to have these two in here together. That'd be a very interesting event. When last time we had that was when they were on C-SPAN at my 9/11 event in 2006 that had such a big effect. Webster, you were going through some of the history of these people we worship in this short segment. When we come back, I want to look at the real power they wield, suspending parliaments, kicking natives off islands, funding genocide, a really nasty lot. But she's such a sweet old lady.
Yeah, the history of it, of course, is something quite different. If you wanted to focus on one person in the entire 1,000-year history of the British monarchy, right, going back to William the Conqueror in 1066, it would probably be King Edward VII. Now, he was king, formally speaking, pretty much in the first decade of the 20th century. So about 100 years ago, he died. So he'd been in power from about 1900 to 1909 or 1910. However, since Victoria had been this recluse for 40 years, he was, in effect, the acting king. And this is the one case where the monarch coincides with the leader of the oligarchy. In other words, he combined both posts. Sometimes you'll have the monarch as some weak figure and the oligarchy has a different leader. But King Edward VII has got both of these.
A real tyrannus.
Not exactly a tyrannus. Again, it's an oligarchical system. It's not a French-style, Louis XIV absolute monarchy or something like this. It's a doge, right? He's like a doge, but of Venice, but if he can lead the oligarchy. And what he did... This is the person who basically organized most of the historical tragedies from about 1860 until his death. And World War I is really his handiwork. Edward VII is the guy who created the Triple Entente. In other words, Britain, France, and Russia against Germany. The encirclement of Germany.
And they started the hype that the rise of Germany is a threat.
Exactly.
They didn't even mince words. They said they're too economically powerful, too many scientists, too many patents. We've got to start a war with them.
Right. And this can teach us a lot about our current period, because the U.S.-China relationship today is a kind of an echo of the British-German relationship at the time. And, of course, that led to a world war. So he set up this alliance system, right? This idea that in 1914, when something happened in Europe, the only thing that was possible was if France started to mobilize, then everybody else had to mobilize. And once everybody started to mobilize, then war was a foregone conclusion. So Edward VII is somebody who set that up. He made a trip to North America, the first visit by at least a Prince of Wales to North America in 1860. It's thought that he helped get the American Civil War going. He did a number of things like this. So Edward VII, you'd have to say, is the indispensable person for causing World War I. Out of World War I comes World War II, pretty much directly, Nazism, communism, eventually the Cold War. The entire pattern of world history since Edward VII has been shaped as a tragedy, right, as a catastrophe.
It's all orbiting this creature.
Yeah, he is considered their greatest activist, right? In other words, their most successful political guy since William the Conqueror would be Edward VII. All right, we mentioned Edward VIII as a Nazi, and this he clearly was. Of course, not just him. There was a whole faction in the House of Lords, the so-called Clifton set. It's written Cliveden, but Clifton set. This is Lady Astor, Lord Astor, a whole group of dukes and lords and others who were all pro-Hitler. And this is the group that supported Chamberlain, right? The appeasement, so-called appeasement policy, which was really just support of Hitler. And did they learn anything from this stuff, right? After 1945, you could say, well, you know, they were fooled by Hitler, many were fooled by Hitler. Prince Philip, this is a guy from a Greek-Dutch family.
Which is originally German. Stay there. Let's just come right back, because I got these idiot emails going. He's Greek and Dutch. Well, the Dutch royal family's German, ladies and gentlemen. And you're like, well, why are they then attacking Germany? Some say it might have been Germany's mistake to not basically kneel to this monarchic family, who they originally came from. We'll be right back. Stay with us on the other side. All right, doctor of historian, economist Webster Griffin Tarpley's here. He's breaking down the royal wedding. And we're going to get into the real power of the British monarchy, the crown. These, pretenders to the throne. The throne itself is a fraud. And what this modern spectacle is all about. Then we're getting into the birth certificate and Tarpley's view on that. We're getting into the economy, the wars, and we'll get to some of your phone calls. Dr. Bob Bowman is also coming up in studio. I've got them both here to be interviewed for a film, so we're killing two birds with one stone, and also doing radio interviews. Always great to have them. Okay, Webster, you were going through the build-up to World War I, World War II, the British orchestrating that, their eugenics, Nazi support. Let's continue.
All right, so Edward VII, if anybody is the architect of the catastrophe of the 20th century, Edward VII is right up there. He's at least a real contender. The question I think that your email question touched on is, what is the name of this family? Who are they, right, this royal family? Today they call themselves Windsor. They decided to call themselves Windsor in about 1916, 1917, when all of those millions of British getting killed in the First World War that Edward VII had set up. There was a huge anti-German hysteria in Britain. Up until that time, they'd been calling themselves the ruling house of Hanover. And they've been going by that name since George I had come over, right, around 1710. But the real name of it is, you've also said, Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, or Sachsen-Coburg-Gotha, or Guelph. Guelph being the anglicized version of Welf, W-E-L-F, Die Welfen. That is what the House of Hanover used to call themselves. So this is the family that now call themselves Windsor. Prince Philip of again, a Greek-Danish branch of this family, is the guy who wants to come back as a virus. But the question was, after 1945, did they learn that Nazism was bad? Well, who was Prince Philip's best friend? His best friend was Prince Bernard of Holland.
Another relative, another German princeling dispatched to fertilize Queen Beatrix, the princess. And expanding on that, for those that are not aware of this, when I say they began what is Nazism, that was only one branch of the eugenics movement that they heavily financed starting in the 1850s through Galton. This is all mainline history.
In the case of Philip, his best friend, lifelong friend, was Prince Bernard of Holland, and that, of course, is the founder of the Bilderberger Group. In a way, you could say the Bilderberger Group, the royal patrons of that Bilderberger phenomenon, were Prince Philip and are Prince Philip still, and now the late Prince Bernard. What's with Prince Bernard? He was a minor, not very wealthy German nobleman, not even a prince. I think he was the ruler, maybe the Duke or the Count of Detmold Lippe for sure. And he married the House of Orange, which is either they're the richest in the world or the Windsors. It's between Orange and Windsor.
And that's a big state secret. They're so powerful, they successfully have had the AP agree to never photograph them even in public.
All right. Bernard had been, when he had been in the university in Berlin in the late 1920s, He had joined the Nazi stormtroopers. He was a brown shirt. He was a member of the SA, the Sturmabteilung. But then it was realized, of course, that he was on his way to...
So he left Germany, ran back, and as the German planes are invading, he does photo ops shooting at them.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Before he did that, he went from the SA brown shirt stormtroopers to the SS black shirt elite, and not just the...
Who pledged total fealty to Adolf Hitler.
And he was a member of the Reiter SS. In other words, there was a subdivision of the SS, the elite of the elite, la crème de la crème, where in order to get into that one, you had to be a noble. So he was a key figure in that. Then when he married Princess of Orange there, the future queen, then Juliana, I guess it was, he had to basically resign from all of his Nazi party offices. So Prince Philip never learned not to be friendly with Nazis. He was a friend of Prince Bernhard all his life. It just never ended.
And he makes constant statements on TV. He'll go, he's obsessed and obsessive-compulsive. If he sees a light bulb that's burnt out in a palace, he publicly says, there must be blacks working in here.
Now, his racism, very good point. The question of Lady Diana about 12 years ago, right, Princess Diana, Lady Diana Spencer, Princess Diana. She had married Charles, of course, and Charles was an adulterer. He had Camilla Parker Bowles on the side. It's typical of the family. His brother, his younger brother, Prince Andrew, known as Randy Andy, was also a rake, an adulterer.
What I tell you, Camilla Parker Bowles, she looked like roadkill 50 years ago.
Today she was wearing a champagne dress, which I guess has something to do with the fact that whenever you pick up the Globe in these supermarket tabloids, it's always that she's drunk again and having a drunken fit. But Princess Diana, after having divorced Prince Charles, right, since her life with him was unbearable, she was going to marry Dodi Fayed. Now, Dodi Fayed, of course, this is the son of Al Fayed, who had bought this Harrods department store in London, except for about 10 or 15 years, there was a huge feud between Al Fayed, I guess of Egypt, and Tiny Rowland. And Tiny Rowland was a guy who worked with and for the British royal family. So there had been a kind of a conflict between Al Fayed and the royal family through Tiny Rowland. At the point that Princess Diana was going to marry Dodi Fayed, she was going to convert to Islam. So you would have had a situation, including today, if gone otherwise, if she had lived, you would have had the Queen Mother of England, or Queen of England, depending. Well, of course, by the time she converted, she wouldn't have been queen. But the Queen Mother, for sure, she would have remained, would have been a Muslim. And this would have happened about 1999, 2000, 2001.
The word is she was pregnant.
Just in time for 9/11, we would have had the whole clash of civilization strategy completely negated because the Queen Mother of England is a Muslim. So this was unacceptable. And this was a kind of her death.
And this, of course, was the
arranged.
This was the estranged Diana showing them, I'll go get myself a Muslim consort.
Her death is impossible to explain without some kind of...
And over 80% of the Brits on record and polls say they killed her. And she made a videotape and a diary and told her butler, Charles told me he's going to kill me in a fake auto accident, which is British and U.S. intelligence agencies' favorite way to kill you.
And, of course, Prince Charles is one possible factor. I think you'd also have to include Prince Philip.
And the reason people are going to say, well, why are you going into all the details? It could go on for hours, folks.
It's true.
Well, this is who we're being told is loving and good, but has no power. Now, let's get into their real power. Earlier, I read the Times of London. Islanders accuse Queen of illegal eviction from Diego Garcia, the island. Now it turned into a giant U.S. refueling weapons base in the Indian Ocean. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, and they kicked out 3,000 of the tribes that's lived there for basically ever, and she just says that she's the queen. If she has no power, she gave the order. How does she suspend parliaments? What is her real power? What is her real position? Like the Dutch, her wealth is secret.
First of all, she is fabulously wealthy. I mean, she doesn't appear on these lists. When you see something that says, Warren Buffett or Bill Gates is the richest...
And they advertise her allowance in taxpayer money, the billions for heating the palaces and the rest of it, as if that's the only money.
She has a large fortune, which does not appear because it is held through this...
They have the loot of 1,000 years.
I think it's called Coutts, C-O-U-T-S, is the bank that handles her personal finances. Anyway... there are trusts and other things that you don't see that she owns, right? It's rumored that she owns a good part of the real estate in Manhattan, right? That would already make her fabulously wealthy. She can dissolve Parliament anytime she wants. She can just send them all home. She has to appoint the person who tries to become prime minister. You want to try to form a government, you have to go through her. She has
governor generals.
The governors general. Let's go through the governors general. I think the most eloquent examples that I could cite were in 1975, you had this guy, Gow Whitlam in Australia, who was trying to set up an alternative energy supply for Australia. He was trying to make direct oil for technology deals with Middle East oil producers, a very good thing to do. And he was then ousted, and ousted by the actions of the Royal Governor General, because there was a conflict between two branches of Parliament.
But now the reverse is happening. 3 times they try to kick out Harper. She comes in and dissolves so he can stay in.
Right. We've had this repeatedly, and even before that, I think a very good example is under Mulroney, so-called Mal René among the Quebecois. Mulroney was the guy who brought you free trade, right? The giant sucking sound in the form of NAFTA. There was a large opposition in the Canadian Senate. There was no majority for this NAFTA monstrosity, so the Queen obliged Mulroney by appointing new senators, packing the Canadian Senate so that there would be a majority for this free trade treaty, which I think everybody, including Canada, has suffered under. So the power of these governor generals is extensive. And she gets these red boxes. All the top secret documents from the SIS, from MI5, MI6, the whole British intelligence establishment, right, the Treasury. She gets these red boxes and she reads them. And the entire bureaucracy serves her. The entire loyalty, right? All the officers in the army are monarchists and royalists.
Well, she has patronages. They still hand out houses and lands and little goodies.
Right. We just had the Maundy gifts, right, where she gives a piece of gold for every year of her age to these poor commoners. Ultimately, what it inculcates is the sense of being a subject, in the sense of being an inferior person. In other words, there's a sovereign, that's her, and there's a subject, and that's you, and you're a subject to the whims of the sovereign. So it's a completely degraded system. It is a feudal relic. And of course, it's a terrible index of the degradation of the United States that people put up with this, right? And now you also look.
Well, stay there. I'm going to come back because they're really the big progenitors of the New World Order, eugenics, world population, Malthusian death cult. Webster and I were just in here rolling, talking about the fact that they've issued 3 of the same birth certificate, each one with different seals and watermarks on it, and it's clear they wanted to make this the debate. They don't want to talk about Obama and the lobbyist and the wars and the police state and the Patriot Act and the military commissions, and we're going to cover that in the next segment. But Webster, finishing up with the royals here, looking at this, I mean, this Bernaysian, I'm sure you've studied modern advertising and Edward Bernays, you know, the father of it. But in the 20s and 30s, he advised the Department of War, then later the Pentagon. He said, look, royals are unpopular, politicians are unpopular. You have big gala events that are seen as very elite. You have the media cover it, radio and print, and then newsreels in the theaters, later TV. And then you get all of the movie stars and sports stars together with the politicians. You have the politicians hosted, so everyone is bowing to them. And that's all this is a Bernaysian trick, constantly lining up people to have an audience with the Queen, and then they trot out this so-called commoner so they don't have children that are unrecognizable, which is a smart move for them. Maybe they won't be as insane or brutal and inbreeding these psychopathic tendencies. But they also arrested, including Charlie Veitch, peaceful, he's the head of the love police, folks that were going to just demonstrate against the wedding. So that shows your freedom in England. They had a sweep the last 2 days, picking everybody up who'd even criticized the wedding.
I think you would have to conclude that Great Britain is a police state far beyond anything that we've seen here in the United States.
Well, she's such a nice old lady.
With these closed-circuit TV cameras everywhere. This Windsor dynasty, they have presided over the creation of a police state. And now we have this this wedding, which again is being used as a spectacle to essentially brainwash the world. They said, according to CNN, there were 2 billion people watching.
It's so incredible. No one can wait until it comes. The greatest event in history. It's so wonderful. It's fairy tale. They're together. Look at the diamonds. Look at the coach with the cherry interior drawn by 4 white stallions. This is absolutely the height of culture. A bunch of inbred psychopathic killers up there. Who run around at cocktail parties wearing Nazi uniforms, one of the princes. I mean, it just goes on and on.
I also would put it in a somewhat broader context. Without being xenophobic, because I'm not, you have to notice that there's now a prevalence of British voices telling you the news. Right? You put on ABC this week. You have Christiane Amanpour, whose center of gravity, wherever she comes from, is obviously London.
Fox TV, but we have a couple British guys, but they're anti-New World Order folks. They're evil too, Tarpley.
We have this guy Piers Morgan today, Piers Morgan on CNN, who's saying, wasn't this a great day for the monarchy? Hasn't the monarchy bounced back from all those troubles with Diana?
No, you're seeing the power of this house.
When you look at Al Jazeera, this is a complete British channel, right? They're all the experts.
Sir David Frost?
All of them British intelligence experts from Oxford or Cambridge or Exeter or Reading or all these other universities. What you're creating for the American people is this idea that Americans don't know anything about the world. You have to get a British expert to come and tell you about the world, and that's going to be Amanpour or Piers Morgan or other voices that are now really literally everywhere. There's a tremendous proliferation of this in the news business, and I think that's a really ominous tendency, because it used to be that an American reporter might have a different view, more egalitarian, less sympathetic to colonialism, less sympathetic to imperialism.
No, on average, British reporters are very lapdog to police state and authority, anti-gun, knock-kneed, groveling at the feet of power.
Something like this. And anyway, their worldview, since Britain, unfortunately right now...
It's an imperial conditioned group. The West is dying just like Japan. And, sorry, go ahead.
The social mobility, in other words, your chances, if you're born in the bottom 20% economically, your chances of getting to the top 5% right now in the United States are worse than any country in continental Europe. But the British society is even more hierarchical, more stratified, and with less mobility that we have.
And they're the king of cronyism.
So Britain is a completely oligarchical, hierarchical society.
And it's being held up as the model of everything, though it is 1984 control. We'll be back with the birth certificate. Stay with us. When you're crowned king, nothing. Bunch of inbred scum. And they sell the British people that you are British because of this house. This is your identity. Is these people that have been sucking off the British people for hundreds and hundreds of years, using their blood for empires, waging war against free societies. It's unbelievable. And in closing, I'll say this about the monarchy. We've spent a lot of time on it because it's an illustration of how they sell things, how they sell the greatest thing on earth is a football game. The greatest thing on earth is watching the prince and some woman getting married. The greatest thing on earth is loving this establishment. That's your identity. And it just goes to show they can hype up the threat of terror. Better chance of being killed by a honeybee, but got to give all your rights up because of the terrorist. It shows how this stuff, upon inspection, is unbelievably, ridiculously over the top, in a satirical way, hollow. Now, Webster Griffin Tarpley, you have one final comment on that?
Yeah, look, I also want to point out the beef against the monarchy, actually, that I try to represent anyway, is a strain of thought within England, within Britain. My grandfather was from Wakefield. He was a bricklayer, skilled worker. My grandmother was from Leeds. Okay, so this is the north of England. This is Yorkshire. And in Yorkshire, there is a tradition, which is you don't like the court, you don't like Buckingham Palace, you don't like the City of London, you don't like the Foreign Office, you're suspicious of this entire imperial complex.
Well, that's Robin Hood.
This is, well, it's the north of England. That's a little bit further south, right? Nottingham.
But that's going on there, too.
This is a strain of thought inside Britain. So it's not that I'm saying British are bad. I'm saying this is a view that is also well represented inside England itself.
No. I mean, they always turn it around like you don't like social, government-run healthcare, you're a racist. You're questioning these birth certificates, you're a racist. Same thing. Oh, you don't like Chinese Communist Party, you don't like Asians. Oh, you don't like the corrupt British Empire, you hate British people. And as you said, Tarpley is Britannic, or I mean, it's really all German to begin with. Yeah.
Sure. Anyway, it's a well-established tradition that the north of England, right, the Yorkshire school, is extremely hostile, skeptical against a lot of these manifestations. And I hope there are still some people who keep that going, as I tried to. But to have that come here in the United States, this is now...
Well, it's totally alien to our 1776 spirit.
Right. Again, if from the point of view of an American system traditionalist, there is nothing more revolting than the U.S. television coverage of this event, right? Fawning, gaga, idiots.
Well, it's the force-feeding this joke.
Right.
It's like inviting people to a great Sunday dinner and your friends arrive and you're serving rotten possum. And they're holding up a rotten possum crawling with maggots, and they're saying, isn't it delicious, as the maggots are falling on your plate. You're like, no, it stinks. I need to throw. And they're like, oh, it's delicious. Look, we have all these idiots gobbling it. I mean, it's like the emperor's new clothes.
Thank you for this very graphic metaphor. I'm sure the British monarchy will never recover.
Well, I mean, here are these crazed-eyed, evil, drunken people with dozens of mistresses launching all these wars, writing books about how they want a world government to carry out forced extermination. And financing I mean, they are the group that funded the social Darwinistic movement, the eugenics. It always goes back to this.
Yeah, look.
And you got the Rothschild banking cartel marrying in with them, absolutely pushing it as well.
Right, look.
In fact, how do the Rothschilds mix into this?
Well, the Rothschilds are one of the banking houses. I mean, if you go back to King Edward VII, he had a group of bankers around him, and they're significant, and were also Jewish bankers.
Lord Rothschild.
One of the things that Edward VII said to the Jewish banking community in London is, if you want to be admitted into society, Edward VII's problem was he didn't have any money, and he wanted to live on a vast scale. So he said to these bankers, if I give you my investments, his investments were not a lot, I want all the profits to belong to me. I expect you to deliver profits.
Because he had political power. Mommy had all the money.
And she was a recluse. So
because he was he was the real king.
He was the Prince of Wales, and he was really the king, out of Marlborough House in that case. So he said to them, if there are profits, I get the profits, and you jack up the profits. If there are losses, you eat the losses. And this is Sir Ernest Cassel. Rothschild is another example, although they had established themselves somewhat earlier. They got into the...
By double financing both sides of the Napoleonic Wars.
Right. And, of course, August Belmont, the guy who ran the Democratic Party from 1850 to, I don't know, 1870, 1880, the whole New York establishment dominated by August Belmont. August Belmont was officially the Rothschild agent in North America.
How did Milner tie into this?
Yeah, Milner is a kind of a think tank, right?
He's their futurist schemer.
The kindergarten, so-called. This is under Edward VII, and here's the problem that they have.
That's why I brought up Milner.
In 1899, you have the Boer War. And what the Boer War shows, first of all, is that the British are militarily very weak, because the Afrikaners in Orange Free State and Transvaal defeat the British imperial forces.
And those are wild Dutch.
Yeah. They then essentially reveal the weakness of the British. And at that point, Russia, under Count Witte, proposes to France and to Germany, let's form a continental bloc against the British. Let's line up Europe against the British. And unfortunately, it didn't work. It didn't work because the German emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm, Emperor William II, the Kaiser, was so stupid and was so much of an Anglophile and was so incapable of making strategic decisions that he did not accept this golden opportunity to really prevent World War I by having a continental bloc, Russia, Germany, France, of peaceful economic development and freeze the British out. And therefore, the shock that sent, the 1899, 1900, 1901 isolation of the British, is what then gave the impulse to Milner and Cecil Rhodes and people like this to come up with these round tables to begin a whole new strategy. And that's what then leads, with King Edward leading the charge, to the Triple Entente, the British-French Entente of 1903, and then the really big one is the British-Russian one of 1907-1908, which was considered impossible because the big conflict had been between Russia and the English. But Edward VII was able to paper over all this stuff, and then shortly after he died, that exploded into World War I.
Yeah, they went more into a covert roundtable. CFR set up around that time in New York. It was pointed out then in the New York papers that weren't controlled by them that why is everything British, British, British? It was the affected style to speak in an Atlantic fake British accent.
Good question. And
that's the Thurston the Howl. I love you.
One of the puppets of Edward VII was Theodore Roosevelt. And Theodore Roosevelt was a guy who had this identity crisis going, and he wanted to solve this by asserting that he was a member of the Anglo-Saxon master race. So Edward VII would write him letters saying, "Dear President Roosevelt, you and I are the leaders of the two branches of the Anglo-Saxon race. I represent the monarchical one, and you represent the democratic one, but we have to work together." And Theodore Roosevelt would go gaga, right? He'd say, "Oh, my God, the king is treating me like an equal. I've got to do what he says," right? So this essentially, the U.S.-British special relationship, if you like.
And this was sold by the Boer War propagandist, Winston Churchill, who then wrote these books that were pumped out, a whole bunch of volumes. I've read several of them, dealing with the history of the English peoples. And
English-speaking peoples, yes, the Anglo-Saxon master race. Now, Winston Churchill, where does he come in? Randolph Churchill is his father. He married this woman, Jenny Jerome. Jenny Jerome came from basically the New York banking community, dominated by August Belmont and others. So Randolph Churchill died of syphilis, like Prince Eddie, was quite common. The Churchill family, though, is the career of Randolph Churchill was sponsored by Edward VII.
That's Marlborough.
Yeah. And Sir Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, one of his first jobs was that he would write a letter to King Edward VII every day telling him what had gone on in Parliament that day. So he was also a protege. So the guys who bring you the catastrophes of the 20th century are, in many cases, proteges of Edward VII. But you were talking about Malthusianism. I think that's also worth talking about. The British East India Company has two guys that essentially define economics today. One is David Ricardo. He's the head of the British East India Company, practically, and he's the source of monetarism, right? Of Milton Friedman, Chicago School, stuff like this. However, they also have a training academy for their executives. It's called Haileybury, and here we have Malthus, Thomas Malthus. He copies things from Venetians. He copies from a guy called Ortes of Venice. But this whole idea that there are too many people, that science and technology can't make a difference.
And that's copied from Plato.
No. This is copied from Ortes. This is copied from Gian Maria Ortes.
No, but I'm saying Plato made some similar comments.
I don't see Plato really on that kind of a line at all. I would say Plato is on the.
Well, he had the duel. From what I've read, he did make comments about overpopulated and.
Look, a lot of Plato is by indirection. In other words, you can't take individual passages because a lot of times it's going to lead to in other words, it's some metaphorical statement.
Because he could be killed for what he was writing, so he did it.
No, there's also that sometimes he says things that turn out to be false later on in the same dialogue. But for sure, Malthus was the big ideologue of the British East India Company, and they ran genocide in India. In other words, you talk about genocide, they did it in India on a vast scale. So Malthus is this idea. World is overpopulated. Science and technology can do nothing. Progress is impossible. It'll always be the same, right? There's no way out of it. That leads to Darwin. That's essentially Darwin's worldview, which is scientifically false. Nietzsche, and ultimately Hitler and the Nazis.
And the British royals love this because it said there's elite bloodlines, the world's overpopulated, we ought to spread diseases to kill off the poor. This is Malthus, 250 years ago. And so this goes along and then develops ideas like social Darwinism. We're killing people, doing them a favor. It grows into the eugenics with Galton. Right. And that's this entire stream of where we are today.
And again, Prince Philip. If Prince Philip says he wants to be reincarnated as a deadly virus to come back and kill people and help solve the problem of overpopulation, again, that statement goes beyond anything Hitler ever said.
And that is repeated by all these top professors like Pianka here at UT. This is their religion. I mean, you read their writings. To be entered into their club, to get the funding for publications, to be even allowed into the party, you have got to say humans are a parasite, and it's literally a control freak ultimate snobbery where they say, we're going to control history, we're going to set up a control grid, we're going to cut off resources, post-industrial world, we're going to then wipe everybody out. World government is a means to an end. This is a global, hidden Nazi movement.
The answer to that that I would give is the one of Leibniz and essentially of optimism, which is simply that science and technology have repeatedly shown that
Malthus said by 1800 we would have a global collapse and everybody would die, basically.
Yeah. John Maria Ortes, that he copied from, said that the absolute upper limit of the carrying capacity of the world is 3 billion. And he said this about 1790 in an essay on population. And Malthus simply took that. So the Malthusian argument is that the population outpaces food production. It's the opposite. Food production outpaces population as long as you simply allow science and technology to be supported. People are wealth. It was their whole approach is scientifically wrong, economically wrong. People are wealth, as Spanish. The Spanish tradition is gobernar es poblar. To govern is to populate. In other words, you want to be a competent government, you want to get anywhere, you've got to... well, look at us now. I mean, they've done the actuaries. We're not going to be able to pay for the baby boomer aging population because they're not breeding. And they do the actuaries within another 50 years. I mean, it's total collapse. I mean, not even 50. This is all common sense, but you have this view, this feudal view, whether it was Japan, China, Europe, it's always the same tropism, as you put it, that they keep the serfs on 10% of the land. The serfs are starving to death because the elites like to keep them under their thumb. And so it's the same view. So they warp and develop modern sciences that ignore science and use these as preset ideas, and then everything else is spun around those lies. Well, they hate science, and the history of the whole Royal Society, right, the British Royal Society, is they pretend to promote science. If discoveries are made, they try to pretend they discovered them, but mainly they try to sabotage them. The other thing is this mentality, and we mentioned Theodore Roosevelt. If you look at the American West, right, you fly out here, right, you look at some of these states, the ending of the frontier, right, the passing of the frontier between 1890 and 1900 in America is not, it's premature in the sense that we have a lot of states out here, right, Wyoming, Utah, right, they're basically empty. And the reason that they're empty is that the process of settlement and population growth was artificially stopped by people around Theodore Roosevelt, the great stooge of King Edward II. Yeah, he sold, freeze the land, have the feds grab it, don't give the land to the people. Exactly. Raise taxes so they can't afford kids. Gifford Pinchot, this guy, Gifford Pinchot, a key guy. So he believes in the great supposed Anglo-Saxon, but he actually puts, well, that's the thing about these eugenicists. They always talk about how great the Germanic or Anglo-Saxon system is, how it's wonderful, but then it's a schizophrenic policy because then they seem to target their supposed own group. What is that? A good example, back in this Boer War period, right? The first concentration camps of the 20th century, death camps, in effect, were Afrikaners. The British putting these Dutch in concentration camps, and you go to them and say, what sense does this make, right? You claim to be a race theorist, but you're putting these Dutch in a concentration camp here in the middle of Africa. What sense does it make? In other words, it's a fraud. In other words, it's ultimately only designed to serve imperial power. What they were concerned about in the case of the United States, the Homestead Act is one of the greatest land reforms in human history, right? The idea that you got this immense expanse and you're going to make that into family farms. And the British and the oligarchs say, no, we don't want that because such people are going to be independent-minded. They're not going to take...
They already had the experience with the British colonies here in North America, and this is the essence, and now they see the rebellion. They see people becoming independent. They see the moves out west to take the 80% of the land held by the feds of the states and serve it out to the people.
Or these ideas that you're going to cut off water to a whole important farming area.
Klamath Falls, Oregon.
Which is simply...
for some fish that isn't even indigenous.
Yeah, the snail darter.
Stay there. We're going to come right back. The essence of the enemy. All right, Webster Tartman's going to be with us a little bit in the next hour. We've gotten off into a history lesson, but it's very intriguing. And I noticed the numbers of people just listening on the internet are surging because this is interesting. They tell you that people don't want history, real history, but they do. People are hungry for something other than celebrity news or how great the inbred family is. We do need to shift gears now in the next few segments into your view on the whole birth certificate situation, Webster, then the economy, then Dr. Bob Bowman's coming in.
Well, first of all, let me say, my standard for this stuff is if you want to be president, it means that you want to get your hand on the thermonuclear button. And that means that you acquire life and death power over all of us, ourselves, our families, our futures, and everything else. At that point, there is no private sphere. Any private sphere is a danger. It's a threat to the integrity of the government and of presidential decisions, because anything that's in that private sphere could be the object of blackmail. And the way that I would approach this whole thing with Obama is from the point of view of blackmail. So if you want to be president, you've got to put out your transcripts. For Obama, that would mean Puna House School, Occidental College, Columbia University, Harvard. All of this is secret, very, very much covered up. Who the professors were, what the grades were, things that he wrote. We'd be interested to know. We want to know your medical records, right? We wanted to know Dukakis's medical records. We want to know, have you had electroshock? Are you HIV positive? These are all things that the public has a right to know. If you look at this amazing hysteria of the Wall Street media, you'll see that they basically say, we oligarchs have the right to cover up. Oligarchs have the right to hide things. And we would have to say, no, the public, the informed voter, has the right to know these things, because we always have this question about, is the president blackmailed? And if he's blackmailed, how can he be president? And I guess that applies to...
Well, the larger issue is they've been so secretive for years about all this. They released the receipt of a certificate and said that that was it. There was no such thing as a long form, which was a ridiculous lie and made people go, wow, what are you hiding? Is it possible, Webster, that this is all just a setup to divert us off into just the birth certificate instead of bigger issues?
I don't see it that way. I think this is the key to the bigger issues. See, the problem with Obama is you want to deal with Obama on big issues. The problem with that is he lies. His whole method is based on deception, on dissembling. He'll never give you a straight answer. How are you going to nail him down? The tax cuts for the rich. He was against tax cuts for the rich. Last December, he's for tax cuts for the rich. Now he says, I'll never go back to tax cuts for the rich again. Who can believe this? It's fantastic. I would rather look at it this way, and I'll tell you, it's like a parable, right? It's a story. In 1998, Bill Clinton was about to make a dirty deal with Newt Gingrich, and the dirty deal was the oligarchy wants to destroy Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the economic rights and entitlements of the American people. And Clinton was willing to do it, according to what we know. You might say, well, he was weakened by impeachment, whatever the reasons. Clinton was willing to do it. He was willing to betray his own base. He was willing to shift to a situation where Clinton's majority in the Congress would be largely provided by Gingrich. Now, the intermediary was Erskine Bowles. There's a book about this. It's called The Pact. Look it up. Erskine Bowles was the go-between. Now, what stopped this? Most people were not even aware of it much of the time. What stopped it was Miss Lewinsky. And Miss Lewinsky, whoever sent her, that's a whole separate question. But the effect of Miss Lewinsky was that the Republicans in the House went crazy. They couldn't be seen supporting Clinton, and even more acute was that inside the Democratic Party, all of those guys from the Democratic Leadership Conference, right, the right-wing Democrats, ran for cover. They wouldn't touch Clinton. They wouldn't do anything for him. The New Deal Democrats, if you can call them that, in other words, the Progressive Caucus, they were willing to stand and fight to defend Clinton. And Clinton looked at that and said, my God, if I try to destroy the main New Deal entitlement programs, these progressives are going to run away from me, and I'll have no support at all. Therefore, I can't do it.
Now, got a break. Back in 1 minute. We've got to do these satellite breaks. Webster Griffin Tarpley, our guest for another 15 minutes or so. Then Dr. Bob Bowman is coming in, former director of the Star Wars Initiative, to talk about the economy and a host of other issues. Webster, I want to quantify my view on the economic system when we come back from break, but please continue with this point. You were telling me off air that look, these scandals, regardless, basically, of Obama's not doing what you want, you've got to politically go after him with whatever ammo is getting traction.
Yeah, during the 2008 campaign, there was this mantra, you know, let's talk about the issues, let's talk about the issues. This was Obama attempting to deflect attention from the fact that nobody knew who he was. If we can look at the question of Clinton and Gingrich and that dirty deal, which would have been very damaging, was stopped by the Lewinsky scandal. How can we apply that till today? You look at Obama's press conference when he presented this so-called purported birth certificate. He basically said, we've got to get down to solving the main questions. Now, what he means by that, and this is what he told the Washington Post editorial board a week before he was inaugurated, is a grand bargain of genocidal austerity to flay the American people alive, to skin the American people alive. You have the Republican attack on the entitlements is direct, right? Open, frontal attack. Obama's attack is a flanking attack. It's a sneak attack, right? Obama bores from within. He says, I'm going to save Medicare, and then he's going to destroy it.
Well, it's a fake choice. The Republicans have the more austere, and then by a few degrees, he says, no, I'm going to defend the people, and then impales them.
So what could upset this apple cart right now? He says that he solved the birth certificate. I don't think he has. I think there are basically three complexes, right? One is the birth certificate issue. The questions we have on that are obviously, if you're a historian, right, when you say release the document, right, we want the document, it means you want to get it in your hands. And what I mean by that is, if it's claimed that this document is there, I want to know the arrangements under which scientific experts, including carbon dating or whatever there is, whatever anybody wants to do, scholars, like a guy like me, or news agencies, different ones, have to have access to this.
By the way, there's
document.
been 3 different versions that AP and others, CNN, have been given. And in the versions, in fact, give me a document cam shot. Folks can even see this.
He's making up for all the time. He gave you 3 now.
Well, no, look. This one says any alterations invalidate the certificate. This one that AP put out has that message on it. And then there's this version. I think this was what CNN. You can barely see it there, and it's totally different color. And then now here's the one the White House put out with this weird green paper in the background. And then you've got fonts in the same words, Webster, that aren't even the same font that I as a layman can see. Listen, the reason I think this is a setup is this is so shoddy on purpose. It's designed. Webster, I'm telling you, something else is going on here.
We want to examine the original document.
Yeah, but what is this? Why are there all these different versions? What
maybe WikiLeaks will leak one too, except that they're a CIA limited hangout. No, we want scholars, scientists, experts, news agencies to be able to examine the original under controlled conditions and all of that. The larger issue in terms of his constitutional qualification is, did he become a naturalized citizen of Indonesia through his parents? And since that wouldn't quite deprive him of his U.S. nationality, did he then in 1981, on his way to Pakistan, pass through Indonesia and renew his Indonesian passport as part of that. That would have been an affirmative act of allegiance to Indonesia.
Stay there. We got a break. Final segment with Webster coming up, and Webster's here in town to be interviewed for a film. So never fear, there'll be more of Webster at PrisonPlanet.tv as well. Then Dr. Bob Bowman coming in after the end of this next segment. Stay with us. Coming up, Dr. Bob Bowman's going to be in studio with us to talk about the economy and a host of other issues. Webster Griffin Tarpley is our guest here with us now. Very informative last hour. And it's great having Tarpley here in town. Flew Tarpley into town so that he could be here in studio with us today. Webster, finishing up on the birth certificate. There's no doubt there's been a cover-up of all of his records, and the White House has said we're not releasing any of the college, the professors. We've never seen such secrecy, and why defend $2 million plus in suits wanting the certificate and then now only release it? It seems like they were starting to get scared that it was getting so big, but then they released this new certificate, and it just looks completely fake. They could make a better fake than this.
Perhaps. It's all very suspicious. Again, we want to be able to examine the original document, and we need answers about this Indonesian question. Did he reaffirm his citizenship of Indonesia in 1981? And that would have been essentially as an adult, and that would, at that point, he would no longer be a U.S. citizen. But there's also a political reason behind this, obviously, which I think is important. One is the blackmail question. That Obama is somebody who is, I think, pretty obviously blackmailed. And a lot of people wondering what happened in the 72 hours before the bombing of Libya when he told Senator Lugar of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee there will be no attack on Libya. And then, lo and behold, there was this attack on Libya. What happened in the meantime? Hypothesis. British intelligence has some proof about Kenya or Indonesia, or French intelligence. They went to him and said, look here, you're going to bomb Libya because this is what we want. The Daily Beast recently had an article about a Democratic insider on Capitol Hill asking, after Obama's budget disaster, how do we get rid of this guy? So that's a Democrat now, maybe a left.
We saw the Washington Post a year ago say that they were talking about him not running again.
All right. One way is through the birth certificate, the constitutional qualifications between Kenya, Indonesia, or other things we don't know. The second one is the Rezko-Blagojevich complex. In other words, the Chicago cesspool of corruption, the Illinois bipartisan combine, and so forth. Because whatever applies to Rezko and Blagojevich is possibly applying to him. And then you have the Larry Sinclair complex, right, which people know about. So those are three that we know about, but there are possibly more.
I'd rather go after Obama and the next Republican puppet, because they're all going to be crooks. We know that unless it's Ron Paul or somebody, on GE being given waivers for their coal power plants the day the new regulations that they're just forcing through, they're not even law, shutting down their competition, or GE not paying taxes, or people at Treasury giving themselves waivers to get bailout money. I mean, I understand you're saying this is the type of fodder the public likes, but, you know, quite frankly, Obama in limos with men, I mean, it's I don't even want to get into it. And the birth certificate, it's like a swamp, a quagmire that I can't get out of, and you could never find the end of. I mean, I'd rather say, what are you doing pushing torture, bub?
I would make the following kind of appeal. I think basically a lot of people who consider themselves right-wingers or conservatives or libertarians have, I think, a fairly decent willingness to entertain these issues. I would appeal to leftists. I would appeal to people, for example, who thought that Obama...
People that want my guns. Nice folks.
Well, no. You know, this is a group, right? And there they are. Let's not write them off.
A group of addled morons.
Well,
sorry.
You know, depends, right? Addled morons everywhere.
I'm just being sarcastic. I'm sarcastic.
If you were appalled by the attack on Libya, for example, right? If you were appalled by the West Point speech of December 2009, which was a declaration of war against Pakistan, and that's getting to be really big now.
But the left's all foundation run. They love the wars. They love torture.
And that's why I got to make my direct appeal here. That if you didn't like what he did with Pakistan, and he's doing more of it, if you don't like Libya, what are you going to do to stop an attack on Syria? What are you going to do to it, for example, Belarus, Poland at one end, Russia at the other end? A color revolution in Belarus. Lukashenko decides he's going to put it down. Polish troops come in from the west, Russian troops come in from the east. Polish NATO troops collide with Russian troops.
That already happened in Pristina, in Kosovo.
That's worse than anything in the Middle East, because there you've got not just atomic, but hydrogen weapons on both sides. How do you stop that? On the issues, yeah, I'm all for the issues. I argue issues a lot, right? My main argument is issues. But I would appeal to leftists. You've got to be open to these questions about the constitutional qualifications and so forth. Because if you don't do this, you're letting the blackmail syndicate rule the day. Because Obama he can't make decisions based on political considerations. He's got to say...
No, I understand the political... I understand, Webster, the political calculus. But to add a word here, I understand the political calculus. All I'm saying, I mean, I see if you've got a bad George W. Bush, a bad Clinton, a bad Obama, that it creates the separation of powers we need over the oligarchy controlling the presidency if we politically destroy his puppet.
And look, if you have people in the Congress that you think are somehow different, then anybody with a subcommittee in the Congress or a committee can put out subpoenas. And you can maybe get a majority.
So you're saying it's a useful sabotage tool. Let me ask you this: in your gut, what do you think's really going on with Obama? With the birth certificate?
I think that I'm not sure where exactly the problem point is, but the obvious evasion. He paid a tremendous political price for refusing to release whatever this is, assuming it's real. He has created a constitutional crisis. This is now a constitutional crisis.
So he's now legit. I mean, he's now supercharged the debate.
He did this, again, if he had it and he refused to release it, this is an act of incompetence beyond anybody's belief. And it's a bumbling, arrogant refusal to put this out. Now, that then leads you, is he really that incompetent, or was it that he didn't have it and he had to concoct it? So that's another possibility. But transparency, right? These guys talk about, my administration will be the most transparent. Well, let's see it. And again, I think that people, if you don't like the fact that he's a Wall Street puppet, if you don't like the fact that he's a warmonger, that the police state has gotten worse under Obama than it was under Bush, and if you don't like the fact that he's a union buster, that he guarantees the defeat of all the union struggles. You look at what he did in Wisconsin. He didn't support those people. He damned them with faint praise. So if you want to get a different Democratic nominee, right, something a little bit better than this, there's got to be a primary opponent, and one way to clear the way is for these scandals to be further developed. So I wouldn't turn away from that at all. And I certainly don't think this is a plan of the ruling elite.
Webster, we are out of time.
The ruling elite wants to keep him in power and blackmail him for at least 2 more years.
No, I understand, and perhaps 4 more. Some Republicans have said they want to keep him there forever. Then they can blame everything on him, and a lot of this agenda is all part of what they're doing.
And he suppresses the popular movements of protest.
We've only got about a minute, okay, because I got a mini guest popping in, and then Bob Bowman's coming in, Webster, and we're going to be interviewing him more later. And it's just I could talk to you for 10 hours here, and other listeners could listen for 10 hours, but on your unique perspectives. But briefly, they're now going from denying we're in a depression to more and more having to, denying there's inflation, to admitting it. The Chinese, everybody racing away from the dollar, gold and silver spiking, oil, commodities spiking. A 60-second summation on where the economy is right now in the meltdown.
Well, the entire effort of 2010 was to direct the crisis away from the dollar, right, to dump the depression onto the euro. And what they've done with that is they've partially wrecked the euro through Greece, Portugal, Ireland, and maybe Spain. So the euro is now significantly weakened, but that hasn't done anything to save the dollar. So the dollar is now in this constant process of decline. If we have a default, I would warn against this default. The bankruptcy or default of the United States would lead to catastrophe on a world scale, and ultimately to something like...
So in the lesser of 2 evils is to hyperinflate the currency.
The answer to this, there is no answer between deflationary crash, which is even worse, and hyperinflation.
You know what? I've got to do this. We're going to have you in at the end of this hour for 5 minutes to really sum this up. We're going to come back to this in about 40 minutes from now. Webster, thank you so much. And just sit tight till the break. All right, we got 5 minutes in this segment, Webster, to give us the diagnosis of what's happening geopolitically with the world economy as the crisis deepens. You have 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Hit it.
All right. This is now a breakdown crisis of the dollar system, of the entire world economy, is another way of saying it. The problem that you have is derivatives, a mass of kited, bankrupt derivatives in the main money center banks of the world, but this is concentrated in London and in Wall Street in particular. We're estimating that the amount of derivatives in the world, especially over-the-counter, collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps, is in excess of $1.5 quadrillion. Now, recently have come to light the statistics about the turnover, in other words, the buying and selling of these derivatives, which has now reached $4 quadrillion per year. So $4,000 trillion of buying and selling derivatives. This mass of kited derivatives represents a black hole. In other words, there's not enough liquidity in the world. There never could be enough money to satisfy the demands of $4 quadrillion of trading derivatives. So all of this stuff, QE1, QE2, QE3, we've had $1 trillion from the Treasury, $3.3 trillion from the Fed, a credit line of $24 trillion. None of this is enough, but what it does do is pushes the system towards hyperinflation. And that seems to be where we're headed right now. However, there's now the other thing on the horizon, which is the default. And this is now political. This is a political cabal that wants to institute, in effect, the bankruptcy or default of the United States. Let's look and see what would happen if the United States defaults. The secret is that the economic life of this planet depends to a large degree on the government of the United States and on national governments around the world. But that it works through a system of private central banks, privately owned central banks like the Fed, and zombie banks, bankrupt institutions, hedge fund hyenas, and so on. If you have a default by the U.S. Treasury, which has never occurred in world history, that will truly be the end of the world from a number of points of view. For this system, it will mean, for example, that Treasury bills, Treasury bonds, Treasury notes will all go down in price. The existing ones go down in price, and the interest rates will go up. And that will mean that every central bank in the world, every one of these private central banks, will find that its reserves held in Treasury bills, Treasury bonds, will be devalued. So every central bank will be in big trouble. Some of them will default. We have to think about the possibility of panic runs on the Bank of England, panic runs on the Federal Reserve, panic runs on the Bank for International Settlements and the International Monetary Fund. Panic run can be any bank, right? If you have, for example, members of the IMF or the BIS, they put in money, they get shares, they get voting rights. Suppose those entities are going bankrupt and they turn around and say, no, we want our money now, give us our cash because we're facing absolute bankruptcy. The other thing that it will do is simply to collapse credit markets all around the world. In other words, if you do this, though, you better have an alternative system, because what you're going to wake up to is not the singing tomorrows of a free market paradise. You're going to wake up to mass chaos and the threat of depopulation. In other words, hundreds of millions of deaths, possible, maybe even more. The only alternative to that is if you say, look, zombie banks don't provide credit. Look at JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citibank. They absorb resources, but they don't provide credit for business. If the private sector zombie banks are incapable and the private central banks are also incapable, what's the other alternative? The free market won't do it because the free market
30 seconds.
The zombie banks. The only alternative is national banking. In other words, nationalize the Federal Reserve and say, we're going to maintain the regional banking system of the United States with 0% federal credit. However, not for banks, not for credit cards, but for production.
And that'll restart the economy.
That will keep you.
All right.
That's your passport to survival.
All right, Webster.
0% federal credit from a nationalized Federal Reserve.
All right, we're out of time. Bob Bowman will be at China Emperor Restaurant, 111 West William, Canada tonight. That's where he is for Truth Seekers. God bless you all. Retransmission starts now. Infowars.com.